What does Blood Maul hide from you off camera, out of bounds, and behind the scenes? In Blood Maul, an age-old question is finally answered. What would happen if a spear-shooting dinosaur was released in a shopping mall? In this comedic and terrifying horror game, you'll play as a police officer, being sent into the mall to dispatch the Triassic nuisance single-handedly. In this video, we're taking a look behind the scenes, searching for things we're not supposed to see in the Jurassic Mall, like how the final jump scare works off camera. We'll also be breaking pretty much everything along the way, including returning Bosco, the big munch clown, to his beloved home. That said, I hope you enjoyed today's broken look behind the scenes of Blood Maul. Now, as usual, I'll hit you with a recap of the game's events, so we're all refreshed on what we'll be covering. So as the game begins, Captain Reed gives you the world's worst prep talk and hooks you up with a trusty boomstick, sending you into the mall to find the pesky reptile. After watching a guy get yeeted into the darkness, you'll bait the hostile Venator using some raw meat. You have to blast her twice in a row, and running means getting speared, so you probably shouldn't do that. You'll repeat this once more, heading upstairs afterwards, only to get ambushed from this hallway. Slipping through the vents, you'll end up in the gardening section where the dinosaur has made its nest. You'll then steal an egg, running through the mall and fending her off while you make your escape. In the end, you'll reach the exit, being saved by your fellow officers as the hostile Venator is dispatched. Literally. Now, recap aside, let's first take a look at this title screen area. By disabling the VHS filter applied to the game, we can see the game a lot more clearly. By moving the camera back, you'll see that this location is really the pavilion where we place the first piece of meat. There's a lot more to this mall area than I expected, but it's not the entire building, as we'll see a bit later on. Around the corner it comes to an end, with this massive open space where the floor extends outwards. There's even an incomplete room here that I believe is the bathroom. It has no assets or textures, so I can't say for certain what this is. Back at the pavilion, the camera is locked to the VHS tape that floats around in circles, and from another angle, we can watch it just spin around. That's really all we can check out here, since the rest of the level will only become accessible when we load into the game itself. Continuing forward, there's an intro cinematic that shows a few customers walking around the mall, only for a light to appear as things descend into chaos. The level gets covered in, ketchup? Yeah, that's all it is. Definitely. After a bit, this woman gets kebabbed into the wall from off camera, and the illusion is broken as soon as we move the camera around. At the start, all the customers, including the woman on a stick, are just floating here, since there isn't a floor in sight. The poses that these characters are holding are pretty hilarious. This includes a couple of T-poses, and this woman, who has clearly dislocated her arm. But it only gets worse from here. Resuming time, we can watch them sliding around in different directions, eventually ending up in a large group as this woman's arm goes crazy. Something that would be hard to notice here is the clothing rack in the background, and despite the dino not arriving yet, it's already stained in red. The Hasta La Vista baby never really shows up in this scene either, but instead, the map becomes all covered in splatters and has its red color overlaid on top. The woman, who clearly lost the javelin toss, just flies up into the balcony, getting pinned by nothing we can see. Loading into the actual game, I once again disabled the VHS filter used to enhance the game's retro appearance, and it now looks completely different. Without the filter applied, the police now look like what I can only describe as discount Barbie dolls. They looked a lot different with their faces pixelated, and now they're just sort of uncanny. They're kin enough though. Moving the camera around reveals the intensity of this emergency situation a bit better, with multiple police cars and several officers all standing by the door. You will of course notice that the player has no model, and Captain Reed is, by all technicality, talking to a ghost. When the door closes, all the police remain where they were, and our captain just stands there, staring at the door for the entire game. Now, when faced with a literal dinosaur roaming the inside of a shopping mall, I had to keep my wits about me, and I achieved this by simply saying nope and leaving. There's a dinosaur in there, man! I'm staying out here with these guys! By warping the player outside, I found out that the entirety of this outside area is solid walkable ground. Of course, friendly fire isn't appreciated, so all my fellow dino hunters are immune to the raw power of the boomstick. Why am I going in there if these guys are clearly invincible? When running around out here, I learned that the vehicles were a total lie. They have no interior, or collision for that matter, so we can run right through them. Another thing I realized up close is that this van, that I originally thought to be an ambulance, turned out to be a plain box truck instead. Maybe the local delivery drivers chose to join the fight, since it's obvious my fellow officers weren't too interested. Venturing further out, we can head past these buildings to find more businesses and what I believe are apartment buildings in the distance. It's weirdly empty back here, and I'm getting some serious Gmod vibes from these usually inaccessible parts of the town. There aren't any roads either, just a bunch of huge buildings meant to make the city appear more full. Just like the vehicles, these buildings don't have any sort of collision, so we can walk straight through them to see the emptiness inside, just like my soul. I noticed while I was out here that the walls of the mall were only rendered from one side, so that means we could see inside while running around out of bounds. There's clearly an issue when canning tomatoes here, since there's tons of mom's spaghetti sauce piled up over here. This area here is the final set of hallways you run through while being chased, and we can even find the police officers loaded in who save us. Either Captain Reed has a twin brother who's also named Reed, or he has managed to clone himself because he exists in both of these locations at once. Enough running around though, let's head through those shutters and begin our exploration of the mall. Once inside, you'll have to pass through this restaurant known as Big Munch in order to get past this barrier. Instead of doing that, I Thanos snapped the barrier and carried on, doing the same to the second barrier blocking our path up ahead. We were able to skip the locked door and put the meat down as usual, but I still wanted to check out the scare that takes place in Big Munch, so I had to double back. This character, simply named Man, gets pulled through the hole in the wall after we talk to him. Moving the camera beyond the walls shows us that there isn't anything back here in the first place, and when he gets dragged inside, he simply moves out of our sight and freezes in place. Weirdly enough, there's actually another body out here floating just beneath the hole in the wall, and another one just a short ways from here. I'm not sure of the purpose, but I guess not even the void is safe from the Dino Menace. Continuing forward, we'll reach the podium, where we place the bait for our reptilian adversary. If we look ahead, we'll see that at the moment, there's nothing waiting for us beyond the invisible barrier, nor does anything appear after the bait is placed. We can hear Jurassic Park style stomping, but no dice. Only after we enter our hiding spot does she appear, and from here she walks into our sight and over to the bait. We can now get a good look at the hostile Venator in all her glory, and she's just as horrifying with the retro filter turned off. She has spikes lining her back and long, sharp claws, and even more terrifying are her razor teeth and glowing eyes. She's absolute nightmare fuel, and at this point, I'm debating just going outside again. After she reaches the pavilion, she'll act like she's eating the food perpetually. When we light her up with a good old Doom Guy special, she'll begin chasing the player. At this point, she started to fire a spear at us, and from the inside of her mouth, we can see this pointy quill object starts off super small. It then scales up in length from the base of the spear until it's fully sized, launching outwards after briefly disappearing and taking the player out. What's interesting about this is that once the spear is being prepared, she has to be attacked in order to stop it. Even if we increase the player speed and run around the corner, the spear will still be fired and hit the player after clipping through the wall. Seems a bit unfair to me, but I'm not going to argue logic with the dinosaur terrorizing them all. I tried breaking her next by taking leg day seriously, taking gotta go fast to an extreme. If we outrun her, she'll chase you all the way to the other side of the mall if she has to, never giving up the chase for even a moment. The only time she stops is when the player reaches a spot she can't access, like passing through the barricade here. If we rush past her instead, we can reach the second encounter and set up the bait. Except this resulted in me getting stuck while the first instance caught up and got me. What's even stranger, I apparently triggered an autosave here, so after I respawned, she remained active and kept walking into the wall here. Only after I fired at her a couple of times did she disappear, which triggered the next set of dialogue and allowed me to continue the game. Before moving on from this first encounter, I had a couple of things I wanted to try. The first idea I had was moving the spot where we're supposed to place the bait. I was skeptical whether this would work out how I'd hoped, but to my surprise, she walked right past me and started heading for the entrance. She didn't go as far as I wanted though, and instead, she stopped in the employee-only room behind Big Munch. Because she never reached the actual spot, I was completely stuck here, since the game freezes your movement during this sequence. Sadly, that means I had to restart the level to free myself. The next idea I had was moving the second encounter's bait spot to the pavilion out here. After getting it set up, I was able to put both pieces of meat down at once. Once again, this worked out exactly as I'd hoped. The second piece of meat was able to spawn another copy of the dinosaur at the same time. And because they were closer than I expected, I died before I could scare them off. Clever girl, but also glorious. Now for some reason, when I went upstairs and approached the hallway where we're ambushed, the deadly reptile was already there and running into the wall. Even though this was the case, we can still watch from this perspective as a second copy loads in from the black hallway and begins chasing the player. They'll run back to this section after being blasted and unload, but this copy never disappears. I can't fire at them, and their constant running shakes the screen, which is pretty disorienting. In this upstairs section of the mall, there's a store full of movies where a small cutout jump scare takes place. This isn't isn't what I'm interested in though, but instead, the movies lining the shelves. There are tons of thrillers and horror movies up here, but two that jumped out at me were Event Horizon and Jurassic Park. While Jurassic Park is a hilarious movie to have on display here, that film was released in 1993, nearly 5 years after the events of this game takes place. Never mind the fact that Terrifier 2 came out in 2022. Obviously, that doesn't matter, and it's neat to see these things here. I should also mention the arcade downstairs, since it has interesting Easter eggs hidden inside that you may have missed. The games lining the walls down here are Fresh Catch, Bunker 73, and Banish, all of which are games made by the very same developer. It's a neat little Easter egg representing their own library of indie games, which is pretty cool. In the bathroom on the top floor, the room will begin shaking and you can hear the dinosaur somewhere around you. Zooming out reveals that this was, once again, just a prank, bro. There are no dinosaurs here, but there is a clown passed down one of the stalls. No, I'm not kidding. This is Bosco, the big munch clown, and he's apparently in shock from the events that transpired. Honestly, I can't blame him. This entire situation is both ridiculous and nightmare-inducing. We can't typically see his face very well, but now you can, and let's just say, I'm loving it. I felt bad for him though. He's on a completely separate floor from his beloved restaurant, so he's probably feeling pretty homesick. I found the goodness in my heart to return him to Big Munch, but this whole thing has clearly got him down, since he doesn't seem much happier. At least Bosco, the Big Munch clown, got to go home one last time before the game came to a close. No need to thank me, pal. It's what I do. When we continue forward, we'll pass through these vents where another person is found hiding inside. These vents, when viewed from another perspective, don't make a whole lot of sense. I can't imagine they're doing a whole lot of good when they just come to an end behind the fans. But hey, I guess it's better than nothing. After this drop down into the gardening area, we can steal one of the dino's eggs. And this is the reason why we're chased through the mall here. If we don't pull a Jurassic Park 3 and just leave them alone, we can break the door down and walk around without being chased. We aren't typically allowed to leave before grabbing an egg, and this breaks the chase altogether since we can now head to the end of the game unhindered. Even though there are no angry lizards behind me, I was still attacked upon reaching the end of the chase, and the game proceeded as normal. Resetting this chase once again, I decided it was time to face off with my new creation, Hosto Venator Rex. I made this enemy a lot bigger, and it was far more terrifying than I'd expected. I was so preoccupied with whether or not I could, I didn't stop to think if I should. It was a lot more panic-inducing, and this only got worse when I realized it could still chase me through doorways and even these little halls. This inspired me to go back to the first setting and do the same, and it's definitely no less terrifying with a mall-sized dinosaur. Now, at the end of this final chase, we can watch as the model used for this jump scare loads in as soon as we hit the trigger. This is what the final fight between our fellow enforcers and the Hosto Venator looks like in bullet time. Quite literally. And after this, we'll load into the final cutscene. Here we basically see the egg we stole being transported to a facility, likely so it can be researched by scientists. This entire cutscene takes place on a singular level though, with each of these locations stored separately in one large level. There's a long hallway where this cart is pushed with the egg on top, but beyond this, the areas are mostly static and unmoving. The camera essentially just pans through these different locations before the final credits roll, and seeing each of these areas laid out like this is pretty cool. But with that, that's everything I broke and found in Blood Mall. I hope you enjoyed today's game-breaking experience, and I'll see all of you very soon. Cheers!